And it is time for today's pre-show of our SY0-701 Security Plus Study Group. We are just getting started. We start in 10 minutes, top of the hour, for those of you joining in right here at the beginning and wondering, why are we looking at the back of his head? You will eventually see the front, but right now it's time for me to make sure that things are recording and we can see our Cylons are spinning around here on the bottom right. That's recording. All of the stats for our streaming info look really, really good. Those look nice. So I think we're in pretty good shape. We've got all of the questions and answers ready to go online. Hello, chat room. Thanks for joining us. We've got lots to do today. It's all 701. I guess not all of it is 701. There's a little bit of overlap, and we'll talk about that in the first part of the study group for those of you wondering about 701. But a lot of our training materials are now, well, all of our training materials are updated for 701. We've got course notes for 701. Everything sort of is flipping over to the 701. So we will be doing that. Let's make sure that all the other cameras look really good. Make sure those are up and running. We got a lot going on. There's plenty. Hello, chat room. Thanks for being here. Settle in. We've got a lot to go through today. We've got plenty of brand new questions. Of course, we have new questions every month. So, of course, this month is no different. We have plenty of questions to go through. And while we'll be doing our first hour's Q&A that I will be asking of you. And then in the second hour, I might as well put up the link. In the second hour, I will be taking questions. And you can put those questions and submit them now. You don't have to wait until the second hour. You can put your questions in using the link that's on the screen, professormesser.com/QA, and it'll bring up the whole Vevox front end, which is the service we are currently using to do our questions and answers online. And if you do that, you'll also see a tab there to submit a question, and we'll go through those questions in the second hour. Some folks say they're already studying for the 701. That's great. There's plenty to learn there. We've got a lot of content on the 701, just plenty. The 701, a very different exam than the 601. So I'm glad we have a chance to do these study groups because we'll have a chance to talk about the differences and we'll go through some 701 specific content. So it should be pretty good. And some folks on the chat room. We got some folks who have passed their 601. Jonathan says passed 601 a couple of weeks ago. We have Edward the Bad, who turns out is pretty good because Edward passed their 601 yesterday, which is great. Fantastic. It's always good to hear the success stories. We will be doing all 701 content today. There's a little overlap, so a few of the questions will have a 601, 701 because some of the content is shared between the two exams. But a lot of the questions that I have are 701 specific. Now, if you're studying for your 601 exam, I still have 3 years worth of content there, 3 years of study groups you can always go back and have a look at. So please do that. That would be a good way to get specific 601 content. And as I always say, you really should be studying for materials that match the version of the exam you're planning to take. And we'll talk more about that in the first few minutes of the live stream as well. We can start at the top of the hour. Right now, we are 6 minutes away. Click. There it is. Some folks sent me an email earlier in the week asking what is the name of the dashboard clock thing that we have going on here. This is on my iPad, so from the Apple App Store. And this is a version called Nightstand Central. Unfortunately, the author of Nightstand Central has decided not to support it any longer, and it's no longer in the App Store. So if you wanted to download it, that's too bad because it's not there anymore. But that's what that story was about, was that it's something you can't get any longer. And who knows, the next iteration of iOS, it could just stop working. The author is no longer working with that. So if you're looking for some way to get into iOS development, maybe you should create a clock. I don't know if that makes sense or not. There's probably not a huge market for iPad clocks. There's at least one, and that's me, but I have one and it works. That's what we've been doing. So we've got lots to go through. Let's see if I can get everything in my eyesight. This all looks really good. We've got plenty of content here. I liked doing the questions for the 701 because you do 601 questions and you go through about 3 years of 601 questions. It's kind of nice to do some 701. So it's just a little change of pace. In the real big picture, it's not very different. It's not a huge difference. We're talking about security in 601. Hey, we're talking about security in the 701. It's not much difference there. But the topics that are in the exams are very different. They really change the scope in 701. So make sure you're familiar with all those differences and how they fit into everything else. So now it's time to kind of have our last look over things. We're about 4 minutes until we get started. I think I've got everything here. Oh, yeah, the course notes are updated for the 701. All the videos are 701. Everything is out there for the 701, except the piece that is the course note or the practice exams. People want practice exams, and those are currently under development. They're going very well. In fact, I love my new 701 practice exams book. It's really coming together nicely. It's now really the time is getting in and finishing up those questions and publishing those. So we expect that'll be available in the next month or two. You'll see those coming out soon. But everything else is already set up. You're already got everything you need. And we'll talk about this. Some folks in the chat room are saying, but I've been studying 601 and then 701 is out. Do I keep studying 601? Do I shift? Do I change to go to the 701? We will talk about all of that in the first 10 minutes. So stick around for that. Stay tuned for more. We'll go through all of those. 3 minutes to go. 3 minutes, Mr. Sinatra. Get things going. This has been a good set of questions too. It's been a good exam. 701 was a nice consolidated. I think they sort of changed the scope of Security Plus just a little bit. That's sort of my opinion of it, but I think it's pretty obvious. And we'll talk about more about what has changed, how they changed it. Is it really that different? Is 1 month enough to study for the 701? Well, I guess that depends on how much knowledge you already have. If you're very familiar with security, it might be even less than a month. If you are just getting into the world of IT and security, it could be 3 months. It could be 6 months. I guess that's the case. Don't worry, folks. This is the pre-show. We haven't started yet. The reason you see the studio is that we haven't gotten things going yet. I'm just hanging out with you guys, making sure that recordings are going, making sure the inputs are all listed there. This is really more of a casual check-in. Don't worry. People will send me emails from time to time and say, I was going to tune in, but it's really just the back of your head. Well, there's actually more. We will be able to give you that view shortly. Don't worry. I'm here. We'll have it all ready to go. We'll be able to step through these questions. It'll be pretty good. So that's the goal, is to get all of those. The vouchers are the same, by the way. A voucher, there is no such thing as a voucher that is a 601 or a voucher that is a 701. All Security Plus vouchers are Security Plus vouchers. They can be used for any exam. So you get to decide yourself on what they are. Oh, boy. Okay. With 1 minute left, it's a good idea to do one final check. Looks like we are still recording down here. Thankfully, we've got numbers look very good on the live stream. That's nice. I think that's it. I think that's what we needed. I think we're ready to go. I should have this going. Yep. Oh, I like it when it all works. We'll knock on something very quickly and make sure that is actually the case for all of this. All right. Let's see if I can get my keynote up and running. And I can. I did see a text message there. So, of course, I'm wondering. Nope, just a normal, non-important text message that we have there. So no worries there. Where's my world clock? We'll keep track of what's going on with this. I need to put the clock in that landscape mode, and then I'd be able to watch the whole thing. I need a second hand to kind of write everything down. Oh, there's more than 4 monitors. There's a lot of monitors in here. There's lots of systems and lots of laptops and lots of Lots of different pieces. But now it's top of the hour. It's time to get things going. I think we should do a live stream. Let's get rid of this. Let's pull this up and let's get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the January 2024, the Professor Messer SY0-701 Security Plus Study Group. This is our very first 701 study group. Now, of course, we've been doing study groups for Security Plus for years and years and years and years. But this is our very first study group that is exclusive, and all of the questions are working through topics that come directly from the SY0-701 version of the Security Plus exam objectives. So if you are here watching, thank you for joining us. For those of you that are here live, you will be able to participate live, which is always fun. So I'll talk about what we can do. In fact, if you have now a browser that you can pop open and you can visit the link that's on your screen, professormesser.com/QA, I'm going to put a question up in just a bit so that you can, of course, join us. And did I put the question on here? These are always the things I have to go through. If you go to professormesser.com/QA, you will see out there on the website, there it is, you've got information to go through. And we will talk more about these questions in just a bit. But I have a question for you that is a question on the Vevox side. And that Vevox is available, and you can reach it by going to professormesser.com/QA. One of the things that I put up and running is I have a question that is a rewind question. This is a question that we talk about whenever we go and look at last month's study group. Now, this particular topic is one that also applies to the 701. So let's look at the question that's there. The question, and by the way, of course, the standing rule in the chat room is no questions in the chat room. Please, no hints in the chat room. Don't answer anything. We're going to show you the question here, and then you submit it online using this link, professormesser.com/QA. The question is, a company would like to prevent the transfer of non-encrypted credit card numbers over the network. Which of the following would be the best choice for this requirement? Is it data loss prevention, digital signatures, SSL inspection, certificate authority, or self-encrypting drives? Now, if you think you know the answer, you can, of course, go to the link on your screen, go to professormesser.com/QA. Please put your answer in there. Please do not put the answer in the chat room. Please, no hints in the chat room. And we will come back to that question in just a moment. Well, we have, of course, a lot that we're going to go through today. Thank you so much for joining us here. If you're here live or watching on the replay, we do one of these study groups for Security Plus every month. And of course, when we're not doing these study groups, we have other content that you can look at. All of our brand new SY0-701 videos are posted and available on our YouTube channel. You can find that by visiting professormesser.com/YouTube. We also have our weekly Security Plus pop quiz question. You can find that at professormesser.com/Twitter or professormesser.com/Instagram. And one of these days, I will change that from Twitter to X. But for the time being, we're calling it Twitter because I have a hard time making those changes in my mind anyway. Right now, as we sit here today in January of 2024, there are two different Security Plus exams that you could take. The first is the SY0-601. This is an exam that's been out since November the 12th of 2020. So it has been out for a little bit of time now. The retirement of that exam will occur on July 31st of 2024. So on July 31st, that's the last day that you can take that version of the exam, the SY0-601 version of the exam. The 601 version is 90 minutes long. You can get a maximum of 90 questions. You might get fewer than 90 questions on the exam. And the passing score that you need to earn your Security Plus certification is a 750 on a scale from 100 to 900. The exam itself has both multiple choice and performance-based questions. So there are different ways that things could be asked of you on the exam. That's the 601 version. And some of you who are watching this are probably studying for the 601 version of the exam. This, of course, is an SY0-701 group that we've got, the study group that we've got today. This version of the exam was released in November, this past November, November the 7th. So it's only been out a few months now. The estimated retirement of this exam is May 2027. So if you're thinking about long term, this might take you a lot of time to study, that you may not be ready on July 31st. You might want to consider this version of the exam because you have plenty of a ramp. You got tons of time to be able to delay as life hits you and things happen, and you thought it would take 3 months. Now it's taking 4 months. Now it's taking 6 months, etc. So this is a really good example of why you may want to move to the 701 if you feel that you're going to be short of time. The rest of the exam specifics here are exactly the same as the 601. Still one exam, still 90 minutes long, still a maximum of 90 questions. You still need to earn a 750 on a scale from 100 to 900. And the format is exactly the same as the 601, where we have primarily multiple choice-based questions, but at the beginning of the exam, you might get performance-based questions. So you've got a choice right now. You've got 2 different exams to choose from, but these are not apples and apples. These really are 2 very different exams in how they are structured. Let me step you through the differences in these 2. This large yellow circle is the SY0-601 exam objectives, and the SY0-701 circle is this blue and green circle that you see on the right side. So already visually, you can see that the 601 has a larger number of objectives. It has 1,034 objectives versus the 662 objectives that you need to know for the 701. Now, that doesn't necessarily make it any easier or any harder, but it is a very different number of objectives that you need to memorize. So I guess if you wanted to argue only on the number, well, the 701 is a smaller exam to study for because it has a significantly less number, 36% fewer objectives than the 601. So about a third smaller, if you want to look at it that way. The number of objectives that you will only find on the 601 are 710. The only objectives that are exclusive to the 701 are 338, which means there are 324 objectives that are shared between those 2. Now, this is how I count the objectives. You may go through the objectives and get slightly different numbers, but they're going to come out to be pretty close to this, I would expect. The thing to take away from this, though, is that if you're studying for the 601 and then you take the 701 exam, there's a huge amount of information you're missing. Half of the exam you didn't study for. Similar situation, if you're studying for the 701 and you go to take the 601 exam, it's actually much worse. There's a huge amount of information you simply won't get from a 701 course. So you have to be able to decide which one of these is going to be right for me. And you can see they are very, very, very different. And if there's nothing else you take away from this, the thing that I'd like to tell you is that you need to study for one of those and then take the exam that's exactly the same version. So if you're studying 601 materials, you should be taking the 601 exam. If you're studying the 701 materials, you should be taking the 701 exam. The reality, though, is, and the good part of this, it doesn't matter which one you take and pass, because if you pass the 601 exam, you have a Security Plus certification. If you pass the 701 exam, you have a Security Plus certification. So although there's a lot of numbers on the screen and a lot of circles and the different sizes of things, the benefit is it really doesn't matter which one you take and pass. Either way, you're Security Plus certified. And employers only want to see that you are Security Plus certified. So that's why I say if you're thinking of trying to decide which one of these I should take, it doesn't really matter. The end game is exactly the same. The only difference is really the questions they ask of you when you sit down to take the exam. Are you going to get 601 questions? Or are you going to get 701 questions? That's really the only difference. So that makes it a little bit easier, I think. We don't have to worry so much of this. The 601 will still be around until July 31st. And I will tell you, based on having done 3 or 4 different Security Plus courses at this point, there will be people taking the 601 exam on July 31st. I don't recommend that. That's not the best form or direction you should go, because if you don't pass the 601, you're going to be forced into relearning everything that's on the 701. But if you think you can get through the 601 materials and take that exam before July 31st, and you have previously been studying for the 601, keep doing that. Go take the 601. Now, if you're just getting started and you want to pick one now that you're getting started, you probably want to go with the 701. because you don't have a limit on how long it will take. And as you've already seen, it's a lot smaller. It's 30% smaller than the 601. So you get a few different choices to make. There's still a balancing act, of course. There's different amounts of study materials available on the market. You need to check to see which one makes sense for you. And that really is where you should focus if you're ever getting into these and trying to figure out what direction you go with it. It becomes a challenge, of course, if you're someone who's kind of working through the specifics of this. Maybe you should think about what would be the best step for me. And I think that's a good way to do it. If you are someone who is wanting a replay of this study group, we have an audio-only version of this that's sent in a podcast format. That is available at professormesser.com/podcast. If you have a streaming service that you like to use, you can go to Spotify, for instance, or whatever you like to use, and just type in Professor Messer. It will find all of these live streams. Those replays will be available on those services too. They're also available, of course, on YouTube immediately after this. And about a day later, you will find that you will get timestamps that will magically appear, it seems. It's not magic. It's my marketing manager, Lori, who's watching this on the replay. Hi, Lori. Probably at 2x speed. And she is putting down where all these timestamps happen to be. So thanks to her hard work, you can go back for years and find exactly what you're looking for in every single one of these study groups. When we are not here doing a live stream, you can find us over on Discord. We'd love for you to join our Discord server. It is at professormesser.com/Discord. And it's one where people are there studying their A+, their Network Plus, Security Plus, and other certifications. There's some really smart people there and people that are more than happy to sit down and study with you. And it's a good place to go for everyone who's trying to decide, what do we do with all of our study time? Well, there's people in the same boat, and they're over on our Discord. You can find it at professormesser.com/Discord. Also let you know that we have a lot of people that will eventually need to take the exam. And of course, you could go to the CompTIA website and pay full price for that. But why would you when the same vouchers are available on professormesser.com and they're already discounted? You don't need any special codes. You don't have to join any programs. You just visit professormesser.com/vouchers, and they're already discounted and available to you. These are vouchers that are available for anyone who is in the U.S., Canada, or a U.S. territory. Unfortunately, I don't have any vouchers that are outside of those countries at the moment. Not only do you get a voucher when you purchase from my website, you also get my Exam Hacks ebook. This is something that I give you absolutely free, where I've collected all these tips and tricks for studying and taking the exam, and I put them into one single ebook. My exam hacks are available if you purchase my Success Bundle, or if you head over and purchase a voucher from my website. You may be able to learn a few tips and tricks that might help you with your exam. That's at professormesser.com/vouchers. Let's go back to this question we asked earlier. This question was about a company that would like to prevent the transfer of non-encrypted credit card numbers over the network. Which of the following would be the best choice for this requirement? Is it data loss prevention, digital signatures, SSL inspection, certificate authority, or self-encrypting drives? And let's see how you voted on this one. 41% of you say data loss prevention. 24% of you, almost a quarter, say SSL inspection. 13% say digital signatures. 12% say self-encrypting drives. And 8% say certificate authority. We've got quite a mix on all of these and working through them. The plurality of you, not quite a majority, but quite a few of you, 41% say data loss prevention. And if you're someone who's trying to prevent the transfer of non-encrypted credit card numbers, the device that will be able to identify that as a credit card number and then block it or alert on that particular traffic flow is indeed a data loss prevention solution. Sometimes these are standalone devices, an appliance that you can plug into the network for your data loss prevention. This is also a great way if you are someone who is working in a next generation firewall. You may find data loss prevention capabilities within the next generation firewall. So sometimes it's not a single device, it's just integrated into a different device that you happen to use. That is the real nice part of this, is you get to decide the best way to make that happen. So have a look at your options and what you might have available. That might be a good way to tell if something that you're already using with this data loss prevention. Digital signatures are available to confirm the integrity of information. So if you receive information, you'd like to confirm that what you have received is exactly what has been sent. Digital signatures are perfect for that. They can also be used for non-repudiation, but that is certainly one that does not have anything to do with transferring non-encrypted credit card numbers. SSL inspection may allow you to decrypt SSL traffic, or as we call it today, TLS, but nobody really refers to it as TLS unless they're trying to make a distinction between the two. We just generally call it SSL, even though we've basically retired SSL. It doesn't really exist or run on our networks today. SSL inspection is great for decrypting that SSL and looking inside the data, but in this case, it's not encrypted. It's non-encrypted credit card numbers, so SSL inspection would not be necessary. Certificate authority is a entity. It's an organization or a person or group that maintains the certificates and verifies certificates for an organization. That has nothing to do with identifying and preventing the transfer of non-encrypted credit card numbers. And self-encrypting drives are certainly useful for protecting the data that is stored on those drives, but it has nothing to do with the data that's sent across the network. That's only for storage. So the answer here, and the one that most of you chose, was indeed data loss prevention. That is the right answer, and 41% of you got that one absolutely right. Well, now that we've gone through this question from last month, that was our rewind question, let's do a new question. Of course, we're going to do a new question. This next question is a performance-based question. Now, those of you that may have not taken a CompTIA exam before need to pay very close attention to this, because when you first sit down for your exam, you will not get a bunch of multiple choice questions like the last one we just saw, where there was a question and multiple options to select from. What you'll get in the very first part of the exam is a handful of questions. You'll get maybe up to 5, somewhere around plus or minus 5 questions or so, maybe fewer, maybe more than that we call performance-based questions. Those performance-based questions are simply presented in a way that is not multiple choice. They could be fill in the blank, they could be matching, they could be putting them into a particular format. There's lots of ways that a question could be presented. And for you today, I have a brand new performance-based question that I would like to provide. Here it is. This is the performance-based question that asks you to match the technology. So I have these 4 different scenarios, and I have at the bottom of the screen 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different technologies. So there will be 3 left over when we're done with this. So a little bit more to be able to work through the question. The 4 different scenarios are: a known vulnerability passes through an IPS without an alert. A client uses an API to access an application function. All data on a mobile device is encrypted. And application transactions are logged in a public ledger. Now, the 4, or in this case 7 different technologies that can be matched to those 4 scenarios are obfuscation, hashing, blockchain, federation, microservices, secure enclave, and false negative. Got a few things to go through here. So if you think you know the answer, your key is to go to the link that's at the bottom of the screen. Please don't put answers in the chat room. Please don't put any hints in the chat room. You want to instead go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. I guess what would be useful, though, if I actually enabled you at professormesser.com/QA to be able to put those in. There we go. Now you can match those technologies as they are coming through. So this is a great way to be able to match together what you believe these different scenarios or technologies might fit. And I've only chosen, in this case, 7 of them from the exam objectives. There are, of course, many in the objectives. I could have put 100 different technologies into this list. The 701 is a very big exam. So I wanted to give you some that could give you a feel from different areas of the exam as well. So it's not just a single place to go and be able to break those down. See if you have an idea of what these might be. Matching this technology, for those of you listening in again, the 4 different scenarios are: a known vulnerability passes through an IPS without an alert. A client uses an API to access an application function. All data on a mobile device is encrypted. And application transactions are logged in a public ledger. The technologies are obfuscation, hashing, blockchain, federation, microservices, secure enclave, and false negative. We got a number of them to choose from here. We have to match these together. Now, if you just like to submit them, it's not really matching when you go to Vevox. It's simply fill in the blank. So if you have the top 4 of these, just put in all 4 of those different. Now, they all have different letters in the front. They don't. So federation, false negative. I guess you could just put the first letter if you wanted to go quick. But you'd have to designate whether you meant F for federation or F for false negative. And if you do that, I think we'll be able to see what they are. Now, these are not being compiled on the back end either. So we'll be able to step through what I believe the answers are, but you're going to need sort of step through what those differences might be on your side. See if you happen to know. I'm seeing a lot of people submit answers into this. A lot of these are coming through. You're starting to type these in and figure out the details. It's important to know this because you may get questions on the exam that talk about different scenarios and how you would apply the technologies to that scenario. We see that a lot with antivirus, anti-malware, and in this case, it's more of a broader question where different technologies are brought into the mix. I didn't want to limit this question to one single set of technologies. I wanted to spread it across really the whole 701 exam. So I think that was the important part to do that. If you'd like to answer this question, go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. Should be good. Let's see how we do. Now, let's step through each one of these and see if what I have on my side matches what you have on your side. Let's start with the very first one on our list, which is a known vulnerability passes through an IPS without an alert. And if we were to have a look at the differences for those, I think we can probably step through them. Or maybe we can't. Maybe we're not going to. Maybe we're going to try to. Now you can see, now you see behind everything that we're doing here. The differences, there we go. So now let's have a look at each one. I'm going to put false negative under the first one that we have there. A known vulnerability passes through an IPS without an alert. That is indeed a false negative. A little bit different than a false positive. A false positive is the alarm bells go off, everything starts ringing. It tells you there's been an alert, and when you go to look for it, you can't find any alert there. It was a false positive. In this case, a vulnerability did go through this. We had some type of attack that was attacking a particular vulnerability on a system, and the IPSs, especially for known vulnerabilities, those IPSs are designed to find those and stop them. But if maybe the IPS is not up to date with the latest signatures, or perhaps this vulnerability has been modified in a particular way that the IPS can't recognize, it may slip through the IPS, and someone could attack a system and you would have no idea. And when you don't get any type of feedback, there's no alerts are going off, no alarm bells are ringing, there's no lights flashing, but a real vulnerability was exploited, then indeed we have a false negative. Next on our list is a client uses an API to access an application function. There's lots of ways to do this, of course. There's many ways to simply set up an API call on your system that talks directly to another device and do it that way. But we have certain options here at the bottom that we need to choose from. And if I had to choose from any one of these, the only one that makes any sense is microservices. Microservices allows application developers to break the application into tiny little pieces and be able to access the backend and database and other functions of that application through that single slice of the app. This allows them to have a way to scale this application very easily. And in fact, the application can continue to run even if part of that microservice is no longer working at the moment. So you have some different options there. The third on our list is all data on a mobile device is encrypted. There's lots of ways to do that as well. But of course, we have a limited number of choices to choose from. And between obfuscation, hashing, blockchain federation, and secure enclave, the answer there is obviously secure enclave. That's definitely a 701 term that you will find in your 701 objectives that's not in your 601 objectives. It is a term that the industry is using quite a bit to describe the technologies that are built into our mobile devices, into our tablets, and in some cases even into our laptop computers, so that we can have protection of those systems as we take them other places. And being able to encrypt data, the Secure Enclave has extensive cryptography features and the ability to store different very important security keys. And of course, if you're encrypting data on a mobile device, having a secure enclave can help quite a bit. If you're walking around with a mobile phone, you have a secure enclave or something that's very similar to that in that mobile phone. And then lastly, we've got application transactions are logged in a public ledger. Well, between obfuscation, hashing, blockchain, and federation, the only one that seems to fit the bill there is a blockchain. You would think we got that one pretty well. Blockchain is certainly in the news a lot these days. Blockchain, people tend to focus on the cryptocurrency side of blockchain technology, but blockchain technology can be used for many different kinds of uses, not just something associated with a financial reason. They could be very different to be able to work through those. So we did not use obfuscation, we did not use hashing, and we did not use federation. Obfuscation is a way that you can take something that normally would be easy to understand and you make it very difficult to understand. That's certainly a security term that's used. It's not a fantastic method of security, but it is a way to make things a little more difficult for someone who's trying to decipher or understand what they may be looking at. We've got hashing. Hashing is often used and referred to as a digital fingerprint. That fingerprint, just like we have a fingerprint that's on our finger, a digital fingerprint or a hash allows us to understand if a particular text or a particular document is one that matches that particular hash. That way we're able to match the hash to the document, just as we're able to match a fingerprint to a person. And then lastly, we've got federation. If you've ever logged into a website and you've not logged in with a website-specific login, you've logged in with your Google ID, you've logged in with your Facebook ID, you've logged in with your Twitter or X ID, that's federation. So those are a very common way to authenticate and a very secure way to authenticate as well. It's one that's used more and more. I see a lot of websites giving me the option these days. So out of those four options, a known vulnerability passing through an IPS without an alert, that's a false negative. A client using an API to access an application function, that is microservices. All data on a mobile device is encrypted. We do that with a secure enclave. And application transactions are logged in a public ledger. That's your blockchain. That is your matching question today. That is your performance-based question. Hopefully you did pretty well with that one. A lot of these topics are new, and if you're going to get questions wrong, now's the time to do it. Hopefully, if maybe you got all of these right, but if you got any of these incorrect, now you know what the answer is. And if you see these topics on your exam, you'll be able to decipher them a lot easier now that we've gone through those specifics. That is our performance-based question of the day. Let's shift gears and now do a different question. Now let's go back to our multiple choice-based questions. This question is one that lists, let's see if I have it here. Do I have the, there's the question we just asked. Let's keep going with the questions that I have here. This is one when we're matching technologies was easy. If I could just match it with my slides, we'd be even better. Next question on our list is this one. It asks, an MSP needs a secure method of connecting to the web servers of a remote client. Which of the following would be the best choice for this task? Would it be A, proxy server, SIM, jump server, IPS, or HSM? If you think you know the answer, follow this link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. This is one where you can simply decide, now that we're back to multiple choice, is it A, B, C, D, or E? The question again, an MSP needs a secure method of connecting to the web servers of a remote client. Which of the following would be the best choice for this task? Is it proxy server, SIM, jump server, IPS, and HSM? So for those of you wondering about what are some of these acronyms, what is an acronym in the question, what are these acronyms in the answer? Well, that's part of the question. That's part of studying. So we need to know what these acronyms are because they may very well show up on your exam. And we will, of course, talk about what all of those are as we go through them. Hopefully you're familiar with some of these terms. You may find that these terms come up quite a bit on these exams. So have a look at what you think the answer is. Submit your answer by going to the link on your screen, professormesser.com/QA. We're really good at acronyms in IT. At least this isn't the Network Plus exam. Network Plus probably has more acronyms than anything else. Security Plus certainly has quite a few as well. It's the language we use to communicate with each other when we're talking these different technologies. So let's see how you did with this one. A number of people already locked in their answers on this one. So the question again asked, an MSP needs a secure method of connecting to the web servers of a remote client. Which of the following would be the best choice for this task? Is it proxy server, SIM, jump server, IPS, or HSM? And if we look at our list, 48% of you say the answer is jump server. 37% of you say the answer is proxy server. We're a little bit torn as we break this one down. See how we work through this. We have 5% that say SIM, 4% that say IPS, and 4% that say HSM. So the real key here is understanding the scenario. The scenario is a managed service provider, and they need a secure method of connecting to the web servers of a remote client. And ideally, usually an MSP is connecting to those web servers to be able to perform maintenance, to log in at the command line, to install patches, to reboot the web service. They're the ones doing administration of those systems. So how does an MSP connect securely to perform administration if they happen to be remote? That becomes a challenge. If you're inside the building, it's a little bit easier because you're inside the firewall. But what if you're outside the building and you are responsible for making sure that you, of course, understand and can get to all of those systems securely? That's the important part of this. And if you are working with an MSP, then you are probably very familiar with a jump server. Jump servers are devices that sit on the outside of the network. So our private network is here on the right side. You can see there is a number of servers on the inside: application servers, web servers, database servers, and a jump server. And if you are an external client, there's probably a little pinhole in the firewall. There is a rule that allows us to access one device on the inside of that network. In fact, it might be even more secure. There may be additional access controls here. But if you're on the outside of the network using a number of different features, you may be able to connect to that jump server that's on the inside. And as the name implies, this jump server allows you to jump to other systems. And that gives you a lot of access on the inside of your network, and that's why we say that the jump server is almost always a hardened device. We've made sure that it has limited access to the internet, and we want to be sure to monitor it so that we know it's not being abused. Usually we're connecting to the jump server through some type of method, an SSL. We're connecting over a tunnel. Maybe we VPN into the jump server, and from there we jump off by using things like remote desktop or secure shell. So that's a good example of how you might be able to securely access systems that are the inside of a different organization, even though you happen to be on the outside of the organization. And indeed, jump server is the correct answer. 48% of you got that one absolutely right. Now, we have a large number, 37% said proxy server. And I think a lot of people thought, well, they're connecting to a web server, so they could use a proxy. It's just an automatic thought. And indeed, if you're, for example, connecting to ProfessorMesser.com right now, you're connecting through a proxy. You don't see it, you don't realize it, but there are additional security controls put in place. But you're a user. You're someone who's accessing that service. You're not someone who's administering that service. And an MSP, managed service provider, is someone who is managing those systems. They're not going to use a proxy server. They're going to use a jump server so they can SSH, or they can remote desktop into those systems. So proxy server, although would be great for the end users, not very good for the MSP. The MSP needs additional features that can only be found from a jump server. And that's the one we were looking for. The rest of the answers, interestingly, are all those acronyms we talked about. A security information and event management device, or a SIM, is one that is commonly used to aggregate all of the log files from all of those different devices on the network. It's also a great reporting tool. When you have all the logs in one place, why wouldn't you do a report on what you have discovered? That is commonly referred to as a SIM. And although a SIM is very good for reporting, it doesn't provide any access for remote connections to any device on the network. We've got IPS, an intrusion prevention system. We've already talked about IPSs today. We know that an IPS is designed to look for vulnerabilities, someone attacking those vulnerabilities, and be able to stop that traffic before they're able to exploit that vulnerability. In this case, securely connecting to a server doesn't have anything to do with stopping an exploit of a vulnerability, so it would not be an IPS. And lastly, an HSM, hardware security management, or hardware security monitor, or hardware security system. This is the systems that we have in place to collect and store and manage and maintain all of our web server certificates are often used in conjunction with an HSM to be able to properly store and secure those, especially in very large-scale networks. So if you're in a very big network, you've got a big data center with lots of different servers, you've probably got an HSM that helps you maintain and manage all of those different systems that you might be working with. So that is the answer we were looking for. Jump server, 48% of you, about half of you got that one absolutely right. That is what we would use to be able to access those. That is the right answer, and that is what we would use to be able to understand what the best choice might be if you happen to be a managed service provider. Well, we've gone through a couple of questions already. One of the things you may have noticed with these questions is that there's a lot of topics in here. We have 601 and 701 course notes. I have my 601 course notes up here now, and someone asked in the pre-show, do you have 701 course notes as well? We sure do. So whether you're taking the 601 exam or the 701 exam, we've got course notes for you. There's plenty to see here. The 601 course notes probably a little bit bigger, but they are all, I'll look at the 701 course notes here. They're beautiful. They're full color. They are indexed. You've got everything, all the text from all of my videos, all of the content from all of those, they are in there. So hopefully this is one where you have been working through and trying to break down what all of these differences might be. It can be difficult. As I mentioned already, there are a lot of different topics, options, and things you need to know. Well, in my course notes, I put everything in one single place. You are able to get into the course notes and have all of the text, all of the important graphics, all of the charts, all of the tables. They are in my course notes. So have a look and see if that's something that might help you. This is a great place to go. My course notes, it can save you a lot of time. It doesn't replace watching the videos, but it does give you a way to consolidate all of that information and carry it with you wherever you happen to go. There are both physical edition and digital edition PDFs. And if you purchase the physical edition that I'm holding right here, the printed version of the course notes, you get the digital edition for free. So you have the choice. Whatever one you would like to get, it's on the website. You can find that at ProfessorMesser.com. Use the pull-down links at the top of the screen to choose either the 601 course notes or the 701 course notes and be able to do that. Only available at ProfessorMesser.com. They're not in the Kindle store. Sorry, chat room. You have to go to ProfessorMesser.com to find those. Let's do another question. We've got more here. Next question on our list asks, a DDoS has caused a critical service to be unavailable for 90% of the business day. Which of the following would describe this loss of value? Would that be asset value, single loss expectancy, risk appetite, exposure factor, or key risk indicator? Got a few choices there. A DDoS has caused a critical service to be unavailable for 90% of the business day. Which of the following would describe this loss of value? Is it asset value, single loss expectancy, risk appetite, exposure factor, or key risk indicator? If you think you know the answer, go to ProfessorMesser.com/QA. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. We'll figure out what the answer might happen to be there. Yeah, one of the things the folks in the chat room were talking about was a Kindle version, but this has got a lot of detail in it. There's a lot of information in my course notes, so this does not make for a very good Kindle book, unfortunately. So sorry. The course notes are more graphical. There's lots of text inside of them. They're in a particular format, but it does have it in PDF format, so you're able to use it very easily. And I guess, of course, if you have the right Kindle version and you imported the PDF, certainly not optimal, but I guess that could be done. I really would not recommend that. It would not look very good at all. I think that just any PDF reader should work fine for you. So that's what I would recommend. So we'll have to see what you think of this question. Now we're getting to more 701 questions. This is definitely not a 601 topic, it seems. This seems to be more of something that's a little different. I don't want to give too much away. You'd really have to understand the exam objectives, I guess, to understand the hints that I'm giving there. But some of you may have gone through those exam objectives, so maybe this helps you a little bit in figuring out the right answer. Let's see how you did with this one. The question asks, a DDoS has caused a critical service to be unavailable for 90% of the business day. Which of the following would describe this loss of value? Is that asset value, single loss expectancy, risk appetite, exposure factor, or key risk indicator? If we look at the answers, 40% of you say the answer is single loss expectancy. We have 22% that say exposure factor and 20% that say asset value. 12% say key risk indicator and only 4% say risk appetite. So let's step through what some of these risk assessments might be. We'll start with something that is an annualized rate of occurrence, or ARO. That describes how often during the particular year, during an annual period, that we happen to have one of these things occur. So ARO tells you how often will that happen. So if you're in Florida, you might get 1 or 2 hurricanes a year. If you are in Montana, you probably won't. So an ARO can be very different depending on the topic and where you happen to be. We also have an asset value. This is the value of the asset to the organization. So you can think about how valuable is that? That server that's running brings into the company $2 million a year. So if that server goes down, we're losing money every time that server is not available. That describes the asset value. It's just one of the many descriptions you could use for asset value. And then you have exposure factor. Exposure factor is the percentage of the value lost due to an incident. So if that device is not available, if a quarter of that device is not available, that's 0.25 or 25%. If you have the entire asset is not available, then your exposure factor is 100%. It's just not there and not available to us. If some of the asset is available, though, then we might have a lower version because it is a percentage. So in this case, that certainly fits with the question that we were getting, which is a DDoS has caused a critical service to be unavailable for 90% of the business day. There's that 90%. So it was available for 10% of the business day. So at least we got a little bit of business done on that device. Obviously, 90% is a very large number. That's a significant problem. But now we understand that what we were hoping to find was an exposure factor. We have an exposure. 90% of this device not being available gives us the idea that we have an exposure factor of 0.90 or 90%. So in this case, exposure factor was the number we were looking for. 22% of you chose exposure factor. Now, to be fair, this is a brand new topic from the SY0-701. Maybe some of you have never run into this topic before. And now you have some insight into how you might calculate things knowing that there happens to be an exposure factor. A single loss expectancy would tell us how much we lost by having that available. For example, if a web server goes down for the day and we make $10,000 a day on that web server, our single loss expectancy would be $10,000. But you can see here our number that we were looking at was a percentage. So there's no dollar value associated with the percentage. We have to first understand, what are we losing? How much money have we lost, or how much of a service have we lost? And then be able to understand how often that service was unavailable. In this case, our exposure factor was indeed 90% in this scenario. Asset value describes the asset itself. We already talked about asset value in that previous slide. And I guess the only one we haven't talked about key risk indicators. Key risk indicators can be used, it's a very broad term that can be used across many different parts of IT. In the security world, we use key risk indicators to understand what different things may be indicating a problem or a risk associated with a particular service. So that's another good one to think about. Risk appetite, maybe we'll talk more about risk appetite as we go through this, but that is one where an organization needs to understand how much risk are they willing to take. And when you talk about understanding risk, well, do we buy a firewall or not? Well, how much risk would we be willing to take? That would be our risk appetite. We make a number of decisions with budgeting, with purchasing, with implementing new systems. We always consider, what is our appetite for risk here? Because you could spend a lot of money on security. You could spend a little bit of money on security. It's really up to you and how much you would like to risk, and being able to understand when it becomes a little bit too risky. Maybe that we don't have an appetite for that. And that's our risk appetite. Our answer here, the one we were looking for, was the exposure factor, and 22% of you got that one absolutely right. Let's see if we can bounce back. Let's do another question and see how we do with this next question that asks, a company is protecting user passwords by hashing the password values multiple times. Which of the following would describe this process? Is it, see if I can move myself out of the way here, is it salting, steganography, symmetric encryption, digital signature, or key stretching? A company is protecting user passwords by hashing the password values multiple times. Which of the following would describe this process? Is it salting, steganography, symmetric encryption, digital signature, or key stretching? If you think you know the answer, follow the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. See what you think the answer happens to be. This may be one that you're familiar with. I don't believe this one was in the 601, but there may be other CompTIA exams where you did learn this topic. So this is one you might want to even break down and understand a little better. See if you happen to know what these options are and where you might find them. Let's go through. I'm going to let a couple of extra people answer on this one. We have people that are coming in with this one and answering these. I want to give everybody a chance to lock in what they think the answer might be. If you want to answer, simply visit the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA, and you can lock that one in. Let's see how you did. The question again asks, a company is protecting user passwords by hashing the password values multiple times. Which of the following would describe this process? Is it salting, steganography, symmetric encryption, digital signature, or key stretching? You have a few different options there. And what might be, we'll have to see what those are. A number of you have already input your answer. So let's see what you chose in this list. And we got another sort of a tie to be able to work through these. We don't have everything that's there. Let's see how you did with this. We have 43% that say key stretching. We have salting at 37%. Two big numbers, and then everything sort of drops off after that point. We've got 11% that say symmetric encryption. We've got steganography at 6%, and then hardly anyone chose digital signature at 1%. Well, in this case, we're taking a password and we're hashing it. Then we're taking the password again and we're hashing it again. We're hashing the hash. And then we hash the hash again. We can do this over and over and over again. We refer to this process as key stretch. We are effectively taking what could be considered a very longer by simply hashing it multiple times. Now, that by itself might be really useful to you. So this, sometimes you'll even hear this referred to as key strengthening. The real goal here is that if somebody performs a brute force, they're going to have to go through and brute force all of this again. They're going to have to go through the process over and over again. So that is certainly a consideration. I'm noticing that we've got a little bit of a caching issue on the internet connection. So I'm going to give it a second to catch back up with us. For those of you that are working through these, certainly we can see that there is a little bit over on the YouTube side. So there are different things. It's one of the live stream. To have a look at what we're doing here, the details. And fortunately, the internet is still up. We're going to let the room know we are aware and waiting for YouTube to bounce back, which happens. It's okay. That is the norm of everybody working on the YouTube. It's sort of the normal thing to be able to work through. This is one I think if you're familiar with these, relatively familiar to see how this works for you. The key stretching is the answer we were looking for. Hopefully that's the one you are familiar with as well. We'll wait for the link to come back on the YouTube side and we'll see if we can figure out the differences. I want to step through the answers on this one. We will not be skipping it. We'll make sure that you're aware of these and being able to find them. Let's reset, since it seems like YouTube may be having a little bit of a challenge there. We're going to maybe try bouncing this a little bit and see if we can work around what some of those might be. In the meantime, I'm going to bring this up and see how that works. We know that on the YouTube secondary server, I do see similar problems. So not much different. On the poor folks who are working on the YouTube side, it just tends to do that. These tend to bounce back pretty quickly. So we're going to give it a moment. And then I'm going to check the primary server on the YouTube side. So not much we can do on this side, but to sit and to wait. One moment we will be able to make this happen. I'm going to bring this up. I'll keep the audio on so that we can make this happen. This should be a good one to be able to break down. There we go. This is if you ever get into the details of YouTube, you just never know where the problems might be. They may affect you. So this is another one of those to be able to work through. Should be a pretty good one. Don't worry, I've got more questions. We'll be able to work through all of them. So you're not losing anything, which is the good part. We'll find what that happens to be. Let me get the server name for YouTube live servers. And we'll see if we can figure out what's going on with those. Kind of a challenge, though, if you're someone who's trying to work happens and immediately our caching is stuck at 3%. Could we have managed to get through that other server? It certainly is looking very good. Looks like YouTube has straightened out whatever problem they happen to be having and working through them. So a little bit, we have a little bit that's here. This one is now, I think, if you get into the YouTube side of things, that could be a challenge with working through the video side. So this may be something where if you're working on those, that the server's not really what you would expect. All right, so let's see and work through what those different options might be. So let's do YouTube server names, and let's see what they are. Custom RCMP. Which server names are they? Let's see which ones we can put on this mix. A.RTMP. Oh, yeah, that's right. So we've got a few that we could put into this mix. Let's see how it looks over on the YouTube side and being able to mix through it. There's not much you can do when you're sort of waiting for the network to find itself. So we will figure out what that is in a bit. Sometimes it just doesn't work out that way. Sometimes you just don't have a connection. And that seems to be what we've got here as well. Let me grab the server, and we're going to do a trace route to that device, be able to figure out what our different options are. There are some IPv6 outages, though, over on the Google side. And it seems to me that that may be what we're seeing with this is an issue with IPv6. So I think what I'd like to do is maybe flip this over and see if I can break this down and force it into IPv4. I'll have to see if that's the case. We're waiting for this. I see a little bit of activity. I'm looking at the line here to understand what the different options might be with this one, but it just seems like we're not able to do this. Let's do this with a -4. Because right now, YouTube is definitely having some problems, and I do see some outages over in, once you get out of the Comcast network, it does look like there is an outage on one of the backbones. So we'll have to wait and see if they're able to route around that. That's usually what happens with these, is we're able to get around those. Let's see which servers are causing this problem. I'm going to do a quick lookup while we're sitting here and see what IP address this one happens to be and who's in charge of that address. Is this a Comcast address? Nope. This is at Google LLC is where everything's being dropped. So it is a Google address that's having a problem. So unfortunately, that's one of the servers that I need to be able to make this happen. So we will continue to wait that one out and see where it goes from here. We'll have to see if that's there. trace route shows the issue on a Google server. So we'll see if they route around it, because we have some time left. We have some flexibility here to be able to work through them. So I am noticing like 25% of those packets are just going away at that YouTube account. That's a little bit of a problem. So we'll have to see. One of the things we can't do, however, is look at anything specific to these real-time questions. We want to be able to make that happen. So unfortunately, we're not able to make that happen. And we'll have to figure out what our different options might be to break those down. There's a lot here to pull down, and I want to see if we can sort of wait for this to figure out. And that's why going from the primary server to the secondary server didn't help us very much, because they're all going to the same place. We will, though, sit here and see if we can. I do notice, oh, now it's starting to creep back and then creep back down again. We're having differences here in the quality of this, but it is getting a little bit slightly better. I'm seeing the numbers creep back up now as we are getting better and better again. It seems like whatever the problem was has tended to resolve itself. So I'm noticing that our caching numbers are coming back up, and we will probably catch up with that cache in just a moment. And then we can continue on with the last question. And then, of course, we will get into questions from you. So stand by for that. Yeah, this looks really good. Our caching is coming back up. We're starting to see numbers happen. We're starting to see things happen. It does look like it's starting to clear. For those of you, you really can't see the numbers on your side. So I'm going to bring up the numbers so you can see. So the one I'm watching is right here. This is my cache number. When this connection goes down, that cache goes to 100%. You don't want 100%. You want 3%. So as soon as that gets to 3%, we will be able to sort of step through the other pieces of this. It is catching up. It's probably jumping a little bit as you're watching it go by. It's not perfect, and I'm watching some of the numbers that are there, but it's doing a little bit better. Now it's starting to go back down again. So as soon as we had a little bit of a light, now they tore it away from us. And nope, going back up again. So we'll have to see where it goes. I want this back up near 3% again before we get everything going on it. So we were so good, weren't we? It was going fine. And then it wasn't again. Up past 25. We're getting there. There's plenty to go through. I know it seems like we're back, but we sort of aren't back yet. We're sort of at a very bad caching number. So we're going to see if we can wait until that gets there. A nice jump up into the 20s anyway. We saw a little bit of an increase. We'll have to see as we get there. Whoever has discovered this particular problem is working on it. They're poking it with a stick right now to try to get that server back up and running. The numbers don't look very good, though. It is a little bit better at this point, but and it is maintaining that cache number, but it's just still going up and down and up and down and up and down. So in fact, I see a large diff. Now I'm seeing convergence happen on my trace route. There's significant changes happening right now with where traffic happens to be routed. So that is a very big difference. Let's have another one go through. I'm going to start looking at more numbers here. Yeah, these numbers look much better. There's one server. It's the Google server that's having the biggest problems. So I'm going to stick around, though, a bit longer. We'll see if they can clear it up over at Google. All right. We'll have to see what those differences are. Oh, we got a lot. Now it's got a little bump back up again. So it gives me a little hope. There's just a little hope there, and then it takes it away again. We'll have to see. We're getting there. And then that's it. Yes, if you're someone who is sort of working through this, I'm looking at the numbers here. The numbers look a lot better as I'm looking at these. I want to zero this out and do it again and make that happen. Let's make that. And see if I can break that down. See how the numbers are looking now. Now they're looking much better. Let's see if they're able to get through. I don't see any more packet loss. We should be getting the cache number coming back up. It's not there yet, but it's trying. So it looks like whatever they did to reconfigure or converge on a different network connection, we're getting there. So we'll have to see where we end up. The number's going up, which is the important thing, or I guess down. We want the line to go up and the numbers to go down. It is getting a little bit better. I'm seeing on my side that the amount of packet loss over on the YouTube side is significantly lower. So that's a good sign. So maybe this cache will come back and we can continue. I was looking at a 74.125 address, and that's the one over at Google that was having such massive packet loss. So I could have the perfect network here. My ISP is running exactly as one would expect. We're having great success in sending data to Google. And then that's the real problem, is that you run into these scenarios where even Google is not going to have a way to fix that particular problem. We'll figure it out and get down into the details. So, and then I can give you some more information. I'm seeing this come way up. On this side, you can see we're up to 17%. It looks like they've managed to, it seems, resolve the issue that they ran into. We'll have to see if that's indeed the case. As we get now, we're going really well. So we're back up now to the 3%. It looks like we've caught up with each other. Whatever that temporary outage was, I saw significant data loss over on the YouTube IP addresses. It was one of those things. It's one of those situations where my network was running exactly as it should. My local ISP was working perfectly, and I was watching the trace route go all the way into, let's see if I still have the trace route up. So my 15th hop. So this is now in California. That 15th hop was the one that had massive data loss. So finally they found it. They poked it with a stick. They rebooted it. Did you turn it off and back on again? They did that. And now we're back up and running. So that was a very long conversation to have with myself while you're waiting for all of this to come back. For those of you that stuck around, though, thank you for doing that. And I've got more questions for you. So we're going to keep going. I'd already set the time aside, so we'll keep going with these. Let's first step through the answers for this particular question, which is, again, a company is protecting user passwords by hashing the password values multiple times. Which of the following would describe this process? Is it salting, steganography, symmetric encryption, digital signature, or key stretching? And as we've already seen, key stretching is the answer here. We take a hash of a hash of a hash of a hash, and the process of that is designed to slow down any type of brute force attack. This would not be salting. Salting is adding random data to an existing hash, putting them together, or existing password, and hashing both of those things together. So hashing a hash is not salting. I guess you could salting tends to be a very specific value that's predetermined. And once you add that predetermined value, you add it to a password to create your final hash. So it's a little bit outside the scope of the hashing, or at least the multiple hashing, to be able to do that. There is no multiple hashing that occurs when you are salting something. It's just a single hash even then. We've got steganography. 6% of you chose steganography. Steganography, of course, is a way to hide data within a different type of media. So you're hiding data within a graphics file. You're hiding a document within a movie file. That's something that can easily be done with steganography, so that you can give someone a movie file or an image that's there, but inside the image is data that normally you would not be able to see. That is steganography. Symmetric encryption implies or explains the process of encrypting and decrypting by using the same key, which is different, of course, than asymmetric encryption, where the encryption key and the decryption key are two different keys, oddly enough. Of course, symmetric encryption is also very commonly used, but it is not a method of hashing a hash of a hash. That is indeed key stretching. And then a digital signature, as we've already discussed today, is a way that you can have a signature or a way to sign a document or an email or any type of media so that the person receiving it knows this is exactly what was sent and they know exactly who sent it. That digital signature provides that integrity and that non-repudiation. So in this case, that's not what we were doing. We weren't doing anything with integrity. We weren't doing anything with non-repudiation. We were instead hashing a hash multiple times. And in that case, it clearly falls under the definition of key stretching. That was the right answer. That was what we were looking for. If you're someone who is watching this video for continuing education unit credit, I would love to send you an email that certifies that you stuck in there and watched this video, even through that outage over at Google. And if you did, here's the process that you should follow. Go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website, click the Contact Us link, and on that Contact Us link, you want to find the connection or the link there or the form that comes up to put in your name, your email address, and in the subject line, put January 2024 Security Plus. In the body of the message on a line by itself, put the super secret code words of the month, key stretching. Key stretching is the super secret code words of the month. Again, what you want to do is go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website, click Contact Us, and inside of the form that appears, put your name, your email address, put the subject line as January 2024 Security Plus or something close to that. And then in the body of the message, put the single set of words, key stretching. You can also put anything else you'd like in that message. I read through every single one of these. It usually takes me about a week or so to process all of these and get them back to you. Sometimes it takes longer, sometimes it takes shorter, but you can certainly do that by sending it in, and I'll make sure I get these back to you. Do not worry. Key stretching is our super secret code words of the month. Now, for those of you who are asking, what did this look like on the trace route side? I did not keep the MTR that I had here, but if I look at a trace route to Google, I don't want to show too much of the addresses that are there. None of them are my address, but there is the ones that we were looking at. In fact, I'm going to a completely different set of IP addresses now for that RTMP at YouTube. I'm wondering if maybe they did a routing problem, because now it's a completely different set of IP addresses to be able to connect to that YouTube primary server. Pretty interesting to have that. Well, I know that we were out for a little bit. I know that it's after the top of the hour, but I have more questions for you. So let's do another question that I happen to have here. Here is our next question on the list. This one asks, an organization has discovered an attacker entering the building using an employee access card, but the employee still has their original card. Which of the following is the most likely explanation? Well, let's see. Would it be privilege escalation, RFID cloning, brute force, spraying, or injection? And an organization has discovered an attacker entering the building using an employee access card, but the employee still has their original card. Which of the following is the most likely explanation? Is it privilege escalation, RFID cloning, brute force, spraying, or injection? If you think you know the answer, follow the link on your screen, go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. I have to see what you think the answer is. As always, please, no answers in the chat room. Please, no hints in the chat room. You want to go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. Folks are even asking, so where can we find more information on what happened at Google? You probably will never know what happened at Google. Google is a private company, and they don't have to tell you what happened with their services. They might have information in their status page for this. Something like this may appear there, or it may not. It just depends on what they want to report. We'll have to figure out the details of what to report as we break this out. See if you know the answer. Follow the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. See if you happen to know what this is. This is a topic, definitely is a 701 topic. So this certainly speaks to the existing version of the exam. Let's see how you did with this one. The question asks, an organization has discovered an attacker entering the building using an employee access card, but the employee still has their original card. Which of the following is the most likely explanation. Is it privilege escalation, RFID cloning, brute force, spraying, or injection? Let's see what you chose on the list. We'll stop it right here. And the answer is 98% of you say, oh, that's RFID cloning. We've seen that before. We know what happens with RFID and indeed RFID cloning. Now that makes sense because RFID is primarily used for these access cards that we use. And if somebody manages to somehow get access and it looks like you walked into the building and you weren't there, it's very likely that they cloned your card to be able to do that. That was a pretty strong bounce back for most of these. We were getting 22%, 40%, 44%. That was a 98%. So you folks were spot on with understanding your RFID technologies. It, of course, would not be privilege escalation, which 0% of you chose. Privilege escalation is a way to describe someone who has access to a system and then in some method they use grants them access to have a higher escalation. Whenever you have a certain set of privileges, you may be logged in as a guest or you're logged in as a normal user. What if you could somehow get root access or administrator access? There might be a way to take advantage of a vulnerability. You exploit that vulnerability and suddenly you have privilege escalation. Brute force is a way to try over and over a particular username and password combination to see if you can discover what someone's password might be. So brute force would not have anything to do with an employee entering the building with a particular access card. We have spraying. Another way to find someone's password is instead of trying every possible combination, which is very common with brute force, let's just try 3. We'll try the 3 that we think it might be. And that's more of an intelligent way to address this. And one of the benefits of this, of course, is that if you try those 3 and you stop, no one ever knows that you were going after someone's password. To the folks monitoring the logs, it looks like somebody just forgot their password, but they didn't do it enough to lock out their account. That's the whole idea, is to do this without anyone else knowing that you were trying to find someone's password. That would be password spraying. And then you have injection, which commonly describes injecting additional code into a data stream. Often we see SQL injection, but there are other types of injection as well. SQL injection, probably one of the most common you will run into. But this is, in this particular answer, everybody understood the answer here was RFID cloning. It is a very easy way to do this. There are duplicators everywhere. You can get some on Amazon for less than $50. They are standalone devices that you can purchase now for about $120 US, where you can clone through this portable device that you can take with you. Can also create a lot of problems. But in this case, RFID cloning was absolutely the correct answer. Now let's do another question. I know that we had our slight outage. It is after the top of the hour, but we're on overtime at this point. So let's see how we do with the next question. This next question asks, a security administrator has identified all possible points of unauthorized entry on a newly built web server. Which of the following would describe this list? Is that a responsibility matrix, platform diversity, journaling, input validation, or attack surface? All of these answers, by the way, are all answers that are available in the SY0-701 exam objectives. So that is a really good example of trying to understand different topics. Well, they're coming right from the objectives. I tell people all the time, you should understand and grab those objectives. They're going to help you quite a bit. A security administrator has identified all possible points of unauthorized entry on a newly built web server. Which of the following would describe this list? Is it responsibility matrix, platform diversity, journaling, input validation, or attack surface? If you think you know the answer, use the link right here, professormesser.com/QA, and lock in that answer. Have to be one of those, right? See how you do with this one. This is definitely a 701 question. If you're studying for your 601 exam, you're going to look at a lot of these answers and you don't even recognize what they're saying. This is a very good example of how half of the 701 exam is brand new. And if you study 601 materials and walk into a 701 exam, you could get questions like this one where you've never studied any of these topics. It's a really good example of that. Let's see how you did with this one. A security administrator has identified all possible points of unauthorized entry on a newly built web server. Which of the following would describe this list? Is it a responsibility matrix, platform diversity, journaling, input validation, or an attack surface? Let's see how you answered this one. The answer, 77% of you, a very strong number, say attack surface. 10% say journaling. And then you've got single digits for responsibility matrix, platform diversity, and input validation, with less than 5% for those last three. Well, if you're someone who is going through the process of really trying to understand how many different ways to break into a system, then we're working to document the attack surface. This is understanding where any possible vulnerability might be. Maybe there's an issue in the code. Maybe somebody didn't configure something properly. Maybe they left a guest login turned on. There's many different ways to get into a system. We need to check all of those different ways and figure out what could possibly have caused this particular issue. One of the ways to minimize your attack surface, that's usually the term that we talk about, is how do we minimize our attack surface? Well, we can audit the code that we're running on that device and see if there's any vulnerabilities. It's a relatively difficult thing to do, and you may not even have access to the code. Maybe you have a firewall and you can limit what type of traffic is going through the firewall to that server. So maybe you only allow web traffic, but you don't allow SQL traffic, or you don't allow SSH. It's a good example of limiting someone's access to a particular device. And then if you monitor that traffic in real time, you may be able to find someone who's trying to take advantage of that. So in this case, attack surface is exactly the question that we were looking for. 77% of you chose that as the right answer, but all of these are real things. All of these are actual issues and topics that may be found in your exam objectives. For example, journaling, 10% of you chose that one. Journaling describes a way to maintain the integrity of data that we happen to be writing to a server. This is often described in conjunction with a database server, where you would have a journal that is created that's sort of the middleman. So instead of writing to the database, or in the case of I'm using a file system on my server that supports journaling, instead of writing directly to the storage device, you can have this write to a journal, and then the journal writes to the storage device. What this does is prevents any type of encryption, or any type of corruption to that data, because there's this middle path. Now, what if we lose power right in the middle, right after we wrote to the journal, or maybe in the process of writing to the journal, we lose power? Well, when their system powers back up, it will check the journal. If anything's in the journal, it can write that information successfully to the database. But if that journal entry was interrupted, it will not write that data to the database, and the database remains with all of its integrity. You don't have a corrupted database. Now, of course, you also don't have the transaction that got thrown out with that journal when the power went down, but there's no way to go back in time and try to correct that issue. The important part is the database is now saved, so journaling can be very useful on the security side. We also have responsibility matrix. We often associate those with the list of things that are responsible for a client or a cloud provider, and there's often a large matrix there, so you can understand what your responsibilities might be and what the cloud provider's responsibilities might be, which of course might change depending on the type of cloud implementation you have. If you have software as a service, there's a certain responsibility matrix. If you have platform as a service, it's a different responsibility matrix, and that's how you decide who is responsible for our data, who's responsible for the operating system, who's responsible for the hardware. We can refer to the responsibility matrix, and very often your cloud provider will put a responsibility matrix on their site so that you can reference that. Platform diversity describes a way to have different types of platforms, especially on things like web servers. Maybe instead of just having a Linux web server, or maybe just having a Windows web server, you have both Linux and Windows. That way, if you do run into some type of significant vulnerability in the operating system, you would only lose a portion of those servers while you're patching, or only certain servers would be infected with the particular problem because they would be the only ones susceptible to that. You have a platform diversity. You have different choices in that platform, and you can run them all at the same time. Adds a little more redundancy and resiliency. And then input validation, only 3% of you chose that one. That, of course, is checking the input going into an application and confirming that the user isn't maybe sending information that they should not be sending. That is the one. So if you get into finding all of those different points of entry, it is the attack surface. That's what we were looking for. That is the answer, and 77% of you got that one absolutely right. Well, I think at that point, we have in many ways gone past or surpassed those 20 minutes that we lost. So thankfully, we were able to rebound a little bit with that one and come back, but we're not done with questions yet. I'll talk more about that in just a moment. This would be a pretty good idea of where you might want to go and think about what different options might be available. In fact, this question's a really good one with responsibility matrix, platform diversity, journaling, and attack surface are all topics that are new on the 701 exam. Well, how do you know where these topics come from? Well, they are pulled directly from the exam objectives. CompTIA tells you everything you need to know for the exam objectives. This is where you want to go, is your professormesser.com/objectives, or simply go to your favorite search engine and go to CompTIA Exam Objectives. And when you do that, you will be able to download the objectives, and they list everything that you need to know for this exam. Those are valuable. So make sure that you are familiar with every single one of those. This is the objectives, I believe, for the 601. I need to change this out for the 701 objectives, and maybe we'll look at those in the after show and understand what different options might be on the 701 and how they are a little bit different. We do one of these study groups every month. I have A+ study groups, Network Plus study groups, and Security Plus study groups. This next month is going to be a little bit crazy for me. Normally, we spread these out during the month. We have one on this week, 2 on that week, 1 on another week, and we use the whole month to be able to do our study groups. Well, those, at least for February, things have changed quite a bit. My schedule is a little bit chaotic. And so for February, you can see everything is on the same week. So if you really, really like study groups, boy, do I have the week for you. On February 19th and 20th is our A+ study groups. February 22nd is our Network Plus study group. I have Wednesday there to rest my voice. And then on the 23rd, on Friday the 23rd of February, is our Security Plus study group. And we'll be doing 701 Security Plus study groups from this point forward. Well, this is the part where I stop asking questions of you, but now you get to ask questions of me. We do that by going to our professormesser.com/QA and going through and submitting questions for the after show. There's probably some already in there. But of course, when we are not doing one of these live streams, you can find us over on our Twitter, Instagram, or YouTube. You can find that by going to professormesser.com/YouTube/Twitter /Instagram/LinkedIn. If you just want to find me on social media, go to professormesser.com/your favorite social media site. And if it ends up going to that site, that's where I am. If it doesn't go to that site, well, I'm not there. So that's one of those that is an easy way to do it. Of course, we also have our discounted vouchers. Don't forget about those. Go to professormesser.com/vouchers to be able to get discounted vouchers if you happen to be in Canada or the U.S. or U.S. territories. And of course, our course notes and practice exams are always available on our website. Make sure you follow the pull-down link for the 601 or the 701 exam so you're picking exactly the right one for you. You don't want to use the wrong one when you're trying to get the best set of questions answered, course notes, practice exams. You want to, and your vouchers, make sure that you have all of them there and that you're using the right ones. Well, stick around. We still have our after show. I will take questions from you. If you enjoyed this video, we'd love it if you gave a thumbs up. And if you'd like to join us on YouTube, you can subscribe to our channel at professormesser.com/YouTube. Stick around for the after show. We'll be back in about 5 seconds. Thanks for being here, and see you next time on the Security Plus study group. Okay. Let's take a sip. Let's figure out what we're doing there. That was a quick cut. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the after show. Well, that was fun, wasn't it? It's always fun when you have an outage right in the middle, but these things happen from time to time. In this case, it did look like the folks over at Google were struggling with the network issue. And it happens. There's nothing you can do to get around that. You can build out a solid infrastructure, which is what we have here in the studio. We are connected via a high-end business link for our ISP, and all of those were working perfectly. So even by switching over to the secondary servers, and even if I had a different network connection, it still would not have done anything. So that's just the way things tend to go when you are doing live streams. It doesn't happen very often. When it does, it just really is annoying for everyone, but that's okay. We have been able to kind of bounce back from that. I want, however, at this point to take your questions, and I can take your questions by visiting the link that's on your screen now. You can go to professormesser.com/QA, and I will be able to look through the questions that you submit, and we'll be able to put them on the screen, and we can talk about questions that you might have about the 601 exam, the 701 exam. You can talk about technology. You can talk about certifications. You can talk about anything and ask any question that you would like to. It's all there by going to professormesser.com/QA and locking in your particular question. You can always submit it right there for those. So let's go through maybe some that are specific to Security Plus. And the first one we'll talk about is one from Pete. Pete asks, how do I know if I'm ready to take the 701? It's a good question because there is a lot of information on the 701 exam. And how do you really know that you're ready to walk into the room? And I think if we go back to the exam objectives, that's going to be the best answer for us. So let's pull up the Security Plus exam objectives. I have them right here. I always keep them handy. I've been working on the 701 objectives extensively because we are in the process of finishing up our practice exams book for 701. So I have the exam objectives right here. This is the set of objectives for the 701. Tells you about the exam, gives you an idea of the different percentages for the different domains. That's where it's listed. And then they just start listing out everything that's on the exam. This is it. Everything is listed here. So we have, for instance, domain 1 is general security concepts. Section 1.1 is compare and contrast various types of security controls. And then you have the different categories, for instance, technical, managerial, operational, and physical. And then you have control types: preventative, deterrent, detective, corrective, compensating, and directive. So those you all need to know. Each one of those bullets is a topic you need to know for your exam. So I think this is a great checklist. You can go through here and start checking off everything you know, or perhaps circling and highlighting the things that maybe you don't know. I have a number of different ones that are in here. Sorry, flipped around there. There we go. So then you can move to section 1.2 and go through all of those different topics. As you can start to see, if you're familiar with my videos and my course notes, now you're starting to see all of these are covered in the videos, all of these topics. So if you are going through this list and you aren't able to check anything off, and you think, I need to learn more about the topic of non-repudiation, I have a section in my video that talks specifically about that in my videos that are labeled for section 1.2. So everything is numbered. You can find anything you're looking for. I think this is your best way. Once you've watched the videos, you've read your book, you've gone through some labs, you've done some Q&A, now go to the objectives and step through it. And if you now go through the objectives and you think, well, I know about 90% of this, maybe a little more, okay, now it's time for you to start taking these exams. Now it's time for you to walk in, because if you're doing that well with the objectives, you're going to pass just fine. One of the things you will find, and I'm not sure why this, I get people sending me confusing statements on this, but it is absolutely the case that CompTIA stays very, very, very close to these objectives, almost exclusively to these objectives. For that reason, if you know the objectives, you know anything that will be asked of you on the exam. If you know the objectives, you're going to pass your exam. And that's why I tell people all the time, that's one of the best ways that you can study, is going through the process to pass that exam by following the objectives. Some people even ask, like Pete, who asked, will there be multiple choice options on the exam that aren't in the objectives? It's very, very, very rare. Rare to the point that you may find that the exams never deviate from the objectives. That's how close they stay to these. Now, of course, CompTIA can ask you anything they'd like. They even tell you that on the exam objectives. There's a section on the objectives that says, we reserve the right to ask you anything. Well, it's more of a lawyer phrase than anything else, because in practical use and on the practical exam, they stick to the objectives. So that's why I tell people, you stick to the objectives and you're going to do just fine. I think that's an important takeaway. If you're studying for the exam or trying to determine, are you ready to take the exam? Go to the objectives. Let's do some more questions. This is one that really talks about, what about now we have these two exams. We could take the 601 exam and pass it and earn our Security Plus certification, or we could take the 701 exam and pass it and earn our Security Plus certification. Well, is one better than the other? Do employers care which one of these you take? It's a valid question, because these are two different exams, but they give you the same certification. And I tend to explain it this way. If you're someone who took these exams 10 years ago, you took the SY0-701. That was the version of the exam back then. And you took and you passed the 301 and you became Security Plus certified. You didn't take the 401. You didn't take the 501 exam. You didn't take the 601 exam. You're probably not going to take the 701 exam. Instead, you simply renew that certification using other methods as the years have gone on. You have maintained that certification. And today, as we sit here, someone who passed their exam with the 301 version of the questions and maintained their certification is just as Security Plus certified as someone who passes their 701 exam today. So the same thing for the 601 exam. If you pass your 601 exam, you're just as Security Plus certified as someone who passes their 701 exam. There's no difference. And employers don't care how you earn the certification. All they care about is if you have the certification. That's the real important part. So don't worry about what companies may think about a version of this. They don't care. They want just someone who's Security Plus certified, and that's checked off the list if you can provide that type of credential to them. You don't have to worry which exam you take. Take the version of the exam that you would like. That's the most important part. We did some performance-based questions earlier in the live stream, prior to the entire network failing. The question here, though, is, would it be possible to get a partial score on the performance-based questions? And this might even lead, it's maybe not just for performance-based questions. There may be multiple choice-based questions where you are asked to pick 2 or 3. So it's possible you could get part of that question right and part of that question wrong. CompTIA is intentionally vague when it comes to the answer of this. Actually, they're very clear on the answer, but the answer is vague. The answer that CompTIA says is, we can, and in some cases do, score this with partial credit. But we also have some that we don't score with partial credit. And we don't tell you when we score with partial credit and when we don't. It effectively becomes the case that you'll never know whether they gave you partial credit or not. They don't share that information. They will never share that information. And you have no way to go back to determine if they gave you partial credit or not. So I tend to think of this as, if I'm going to look at this from the perspective of someone taking their exam, maybe what I'll do is just try to do the best I can and not worry about whether it's partial credit or not. Instead, if we miss any part of it, let's just assume we missed the whole thing, because that's a good way, I think, to give you more of a conservative perspective of the scoring system, especially if you're doing a practice exam or scoring this yourself. On the actual exam, it doesn't matter whether you think you got partial credit or not. You'll never know. So they could, they might, or they might not. What could be clearer than that? At least they told us that they might or they might not. I'm not sure that's an answer, but at least it points us in a direction, right? Being able to work through those. Other questions. Here's one's more of a broader question. So I see this all the time. Leah asks, hello, what's the best way to study for the Security Plus 701 exam? I just got hired by a government contractor, and government contractors in the U.S. love the Security Plus certification. I need to get Security Plus certified by May. That is a great time frame, by the way. So they are being very reasonable in how long it might take someone to study for this exam. And I would say on average, most people that study for the 601 or the 701 Security Plus exam tends to take 2 or 3 months to be able to study for everything that you need for most people, for the average folks. Now, if it's me, it takes me 6 months. So it just depends on what's happening in your life, how much time you have to study, and a lot of other factors as well. But I would say on average, most people can complete their studies in approximately 2 to 3 months. So the question is, what's the best way to study then? How do we study for this in the most efficient way to be able to get this exam done by May? That's a pretty good ramp. We're almost at the end of January, so you've got February, March, April, and that's good 3-4 months before you have to take that exam. What I would always recommend, and where I start and where I end, is with the exam objectives. That should be the first thing you download, should be the last thing you reference before walking into that exam. The CompTIA exam objectives have everything you need to know in them, and they'll give you a direction on what you should be studying. I also have a number of different recommendations for study. I always say that you should study from 4 different sources, ideally. Those 4 sources might be a video course. Maybe that's a little self-serving, but I think that video courses have value, or else I wouldn't have done one. I also think books have value. I haven't written a book, and I would recommend you get a book. I have books that are my course notes and practice exams. That's not the type of book I'm talking about. I mean more of a textbook, more of a complete, organized, well-structured overview of every single topic in book form. So that's a pretty thick book, as you can imagine. So books are always good. Some people study well from books. Some people don't. Some people study very well from videos. Some people don't. You have to pick the study type that best fits you. So those at least are 2 things that I recommend. I also like to see a lot of hands-on. Hands-on gives you a way of learning that's very different than watching a video or reading a book, which are relatively passive ways to learn. But what if you're at a keyboard and you're typing in different things and you're watching the encryption and decryption occur right on your screen? It helps you learn in a different way. It fires the synapses differently. And I think that someone who is trying to understand these topics, maybe doing these topics at the command prompt, might actually be very helpful. So that's a third thing you should consider. Our labs. We have the CompTIA labs on our website. You can have a look at those. I think they're very, very good. There's other third-party labs available as well. And then, of course, one of the last things I recommend is that you do some Q&A. So once you've gone through the videos, you've gone through the book, you've gone through the labs, now it's time to test yourself. And high-quality questions are always good. For those of you that worked on my 601 exam, you probably used my 601 practice exams. They are specifically built for someone who is working through the 601. There will shortly be, in the coming months, you're going to see a book just like this, but it will have a 701 on the title page right there. So it's coming along nicely. I really like where we're going with that, but those are not available quite yet. Please be patient with us as we get those out to you. But they're extensive to write. There's more than just a question and an answer. There are also extensive explanations of every single answer that's in the book. So it takes a little bit of time to write, but they're really, really good. You're going to like them, I'm sure. Those are the 4 things I recommend. Get a video course, good book, get some labs, and go through some questions. And I think those are the best ways to prepare for any certification exam, not just the ones that might come from CompTIA. But I think CompTIA putting everything into the exam objectives, nobody else does that. You don't get that from Microsoft. You don't get it from Cisco. You don't get it from Amazon. You don't get it from anybody else. So, or rarely do you see that. So make sure you take advantage of those objectives. Let's do some more questions. Got some more here. Other questions that we have here. What are performance-based questions like typically? This is a pretty good question. And I just kind of removed it from the screen here. It was up there for a moment, so I apologize that it's not there at this very second. But let's talk about performance-based questions, because it's difficult to describe performance-based questions as something typical. They don't tend to be very typical. Performance-based questions also tend to change all the time. We've noticed that there's certainly matching questions, drag and drop. Effectively, anything but multiple choice is a performance-based question. But what do we really see? Now, a lot of the things on the exam are drag and drop. Very often it's multiple topics they're combining into a single question. Sometimes it's matching. Sometimes it's putting things in a particular order, maybe from highest to lowest or fastest to slowest. Sometimes it is a question where there is a diagram on the screen and you have to fill in the blanks of the diagram, maybe drag and drop things into the diagram. So it just depends on how they've planned to do these questions. And the performance-based questions evolve over time. CompTIA tends to create different types of questions with different ways to answer all the time. So the questions that we have for performance-based questions today with 701 exam may be very different than the questions we get 3 years from now on the 701 exam. So this is a little bit of a challenge. There is nothing like a typical performance-based question. They are constantly evolving, constantly changing. But I think if you, and here's the key, by the way, here's the takeaway for your performance-based questions. If you know the exam objectives, if you understand all of the topics in the exam objectives, it doesn't matter how they ask the question. You know the answer. Whether it's multiple choice, whether it's fill in the blank, whether it's a matching question, it doesn't matter. We had a matching question as our performance-based question today. They tend to be a little bit easier to do in a live stream like this. So I tend to ask matching questions quite a bit. Not always. Some are drag and drop. Some are multiple choice. Some are multiple choice. You could have some like that. Sometimes it's at a command line, although with the 701 exam, there are no command lines that you need to know. There's no commands you need to know on the 701. Did you notice that? We went from needing to know those 20 different utilities on the 601 to down to 0 utilities on the 701. So a little bit different. So you may not get things at the command prompt on the 701 exam, but you might get it on the 601 exam and certainly on other CompTIA exams as well. I think what CompTIA is really trying to do is take the Security Plus and turn it into your entry-level security certification. And then when you want to do more with this, you want to go to the command line. You want to run these utilities. You want to use these functions on a system. Now you need to move up to the CISA Plus, for example, because a lot of that is in the CISA Plus and certainly in the CASP as well, which they may be renaming here later in the year. We'll deal with that at that time. But for Security Plus, if you know the objectives, you're going to do just fine. It doesn't matter how they ask the question. More questions from you. If you want to submit a question, follow the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA, and that is the way to do it. Let's address the question. We talked about this earlier in the study group. This has come up again in the chat room multiple times as we have been in the Q&A here in our after show. And the question is for folks that have been studying their 601, and then they suddenly look up and realize, oh, the 701 is available. And I think us as human beings want to naturally pivot and go after the new thing. Let's do the 701. But that's not really, in most cases, what you should be doing. The 601, the 701 are very, very, very different exams. In fact, let's bring up that what could be better than a Venn diagram, right? Let's bring up the Venn diagram of the differences between the 601 and the 701 exam. And here they are. So the 601 exam, as you can tell, is much bigger, has over 1,000 objectives in it. It's the big yellow ball that we see here. And then 701 is how close we're getting to Tatooine before we're in range. No, that's not it. It's the 701's much smaller, 662 objectives as we go through it. And you can see that if you studied for the 601, 710 of those objectives don't appear on the 701 exam. That's a lot of things dropped from that exam. Over 60% of the 601 exam is just missing now. It's just gone on the 601. The 701, relatively smaller, but if you studied for the 601, you effectively know half of the 701 content. That sounds like it's a lot, but it really isn't. There's a lot of content you still don't know. A lot of the new stuff, 50% of the 701 exam is brand new. Topics like we covered today with Secure Enclave and the others that we went through, those are in the blue section. And then some of the others that we saw today that were combined that you saw in both the 601 and the 701, they're in that green section right here in the middle. So that is the differences between those two. That's really the comparison of those differences. And you'd have to put them back to back. You'd have to look at both of those objectives, which is what I did, and compare every single objective on 601 to 701, and then compare every 701 objectives to 601. I went through them twice and did it both ways. So I could tell exactly what was there. So that is one of the best ways to compare those two. I've already done it for you, and you can kind of see some of the differences between those. The scope is quite different. There's quite a number of topics that were simply dropped. 65% of the 601 exam was dropped in the 701. So that is pretty important to understand those differences. I highly recommend you look through the exam objectives. It's one of the best ways to know what those differences might be. But let's go back to the question where you've already been studying for the 601. Now you're looking at that 701 thinking, maybe I should study that one. Well, if you've invested a lot of time and money in not only the time in studying, but the money in the study materials for the 601, those aren't going to help you when you move to the 701. 701 is a very different exam. And if you've already put in a lot of time and a lot of money, it might make more sense to finish up your 601 studies and go take that exam and earn your Security Plus before that exam series retires on July 31st. I think that's really common sense. I think that's really the best way to approach it. As humans, we see something new, it's shiny, people are talking about it. There's a lot of press releases that come out when those new versions hit. Now there's a new video series. You may think, I really should be studying that. It has new content in it. It's shinier. It's prettier. I want to go study that one. But the reality is that the content that's in the 601 is still just as valid from a security perspective as the 701. Just because they aren't asking the questions anymore doesn't mean the data is or the information is somehow less valid. The 601 content is still exactly where it should be in today's role for security. So it doesn't matter that you're studying 601 content. All of that content is still valid and useful in the world of IT security. The 701 content is different. It's just different questions and different topics that are in that list. And of course, as I mentioned, it's more of a restructuring so they can position their CISA Plus and CASP exams to be a little more fluid, a little more of a pathway between all of them. Instead of one of the things you may have noticed, if you take the 601 exam and then you go take the CISA, you may see quite a bit of overlap. Well, they've effectively removed a lot of that overlap. So you're really focusing on one single thing. So it's more about your time and your investment. If you really, 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 really want to take the 701, I can't stop you. But if you've not really been studying much for the 601, it might make more sense to go the 701. That part's really up to you. And the piece that's available. And there's more and more topics and more study materials being released every day for the 701. These things tend to work very quickly. And our practice exams, for example, will be available shortly. So I wouldn't worry about that piece either. There's quite a large number of study materials now available for the 701. You can't say that there's nothing published because there's tons of things out there that you can read, you can watch, you can use labs, there's practice exams. It's all available. And I have those on my website as well. So you got plenty of options for that. You wouldn't be able to miss anything. So hopefully that gives you at least an idea of how you can make the decision for yourself. Everybody will be making their own decision on that one. There's no single answer. You'll have to figure out where you are in the world of study, how much money you've invested, and if you want to switch those around. Let's do some more questions. I've got more that you've sent in. We have some time left before we have to shut this one down. We got a little bit more. Folks said, when will I publish my 701 practice exams? Before June? Oh, yes. Our 701 practice questions will probably be out in the coming months. We'll have this out very, very soon, I would expect, be able to have those. Hopefully that can give you a time frame on these. We're never quite sure the exact release date, but I would say in a couple of months, you'll see that book is already available on our website. So pretty easy. Other questions. Let's keep going down this list and be able to understand. Some people, here's a question. I'll address this, although this is a question about someone else's questions, which I don't tend to answer because it's someone else's questions. So someone took a practice exam and they say the practice exam they took asked questions about topics that are nowhere in the exam objectives. That's right. They are. What we refer to those in the industry, refer to those as bad questions. That's the technical term. Whoever published those questions for you and told you that they would be accurate for the version of the exam that you are using did not exactly provide a level of truth with you. Those questions are not accurate for the current version of the exam, but they chose not to update them. That's because it's hard to update these questions. It takes time and effort, and you have to write things, and you have to study the objectives and understand them. They took the easy way out and provided you with a bunch of old questions. So if you're in a situation where you're taking a practice exam and you're noticing a lot of the questions are topics that have nothing to do with the latest version of the exam objectives, I would recommend you get rid of those questions. They're not going to be helpful to you. You'll never see those topics on the exam. They do not show up. I will tell you, though, people that have done this before, they've sent a note back saying, why are you asking a question about this when this is nowhere on the the exam objectives? And the answer they get back is, well, they could ask it because it says in the objectives they could ask anything. That's not how it works. It's not how it works at all. They don't go outside the scope of the objectives. Why would you publish objectives and then not test people on it? It doesn't make sense. So that's one of those situations where don't believe the hype on that one. Stick to the objectives and you will be fine. That's my recommendation. Other questions. There's got to be more listed in here. There are extensive changes between the 601 and 701. We don't have time to go through all of the changes and what is different in those. But I will tell you that it is broad and quite extensive to make that happen. So make sure you look over the objectives, make sure you're familiar with what's on the exam, and make sure all of your study materials match the version of the exam that you're planning to take, and you'll do fine. So let's do some more and break through the different examples of these. Lot of good questions coming in this month about the exam. I think we probably answered a lot of these already, so we won't dive into these. But for those of you that submitted multiples on those, I think we've covered most of those. This is a pretty good one. It's a little different. In fact, this kind of, I'm going to combine two questions together so that we can kind of address this one. It's a pretty good one, actually. These two questions, one from Kevin, one from... let's get the other. Oh, sorry. Get both of these up. There we go. And here's the questions. This first one asks, how does the in-person exam experience compare to the at-home exam experience? And the next question is, can we use scratch paper in the exam? Well, the experience is very different at home and in person. The exam is the same, but the experience is quite different. I like how you asked the question, is the experience... How do you compare the experience of both? So the exam itself, well, there's too much of me there. Let's get rid of one of me. There we go. The exam itself is the same. If you were to take the exam at home on your computer, it is the same front end. It's the same user interface. It's the same keystrokes. It's the same mouse movements. It's exactly the same software or very similar to what you see on the screen, is exactly the same as what you would see on the screen at a testing center. So if you drive to a testing center and you start the exam, or you stay at home and you start the exam, on the screen it looks the same. So the process of using the software, the process of taking the exam, the fundamentals of what you click on the screen and how you flag a question and how you end the exam and how you do everything is identical at home to a testing center. So that part's easy, but it is a different experience. And here's really where the differences are. When you're in a testing center, the testing center is a secure area. They know exactly who goes into that room, who comes out of the room. They have a camera watching you. They are in control of those systems. They know exactly what type of security they have in place to protect the exam contents. It is something that is a known quantity. At home, it is exactly the opposite. There is no known quantity at your home. At your home, there are many variables. There's the possibility that someone could be recording their session. There's the possibility that someone could walk in. There's a possibility that somebody might be off camera giving you the answers. And for that reason, there's a number of security processes you have to follow at home that you do not have to do when you go to a testing center. For example, when you start the exam, you have to take a picture of the entire area and make sure that everything is exactly as it should be. There's a set of rules you have to follow on what's allowed on your desk and what isn't allowed on your desk. They'll also have you go through the process of making sure you're taking the exam in a secure room, that everything has been cleared off the desk, that you don't have headphones on, that there's nothing that could be recording, that your phone is not on the desk. Just a large number of things that you don't have to worry about when you go to a testing center. To the point that people will occasionally think about a question. They're reading the question. How does the in-person experience compare to the at-home? They even say it out loud. They mutter to themselves. How does the in-person exam experience compare to the at-home? Message pops up on the screen because they are watching you when you're at home. And they tell you, please don't put your hand in front of your face. Please don't talk in the exam. And they have the option at that point to end the exam. You have violated the terms of the exam. We're ending the exam right now. Now, in reality, they tend to give you a chance. They tend to give you a warning. But if you end up doing this again, all right, can we use scratch for it? Oh, suddenly the screen goes dark and suddenly they tell you, nope, we've kicked you out of the exam. This happens a lot. This is not an unusual thing for people to run into. So if you're the kind of person who you don't really have a great place to take the exam in your home, it may be loud, there's noises, there's dogs, there's people, that's bad. That can be an immediate disqualification. Maybe you don't have a room that you can close up or lock. There have been cases where someone's been taking their exam and their roommate walked behind them on their way to somewhere else, immediately canceled, and you lost your exam fee. You know, this happens. So if that describes your house, go to an exam center. But there may be cases, and I see this all the time, where someone may live an hour or 2 hours or more away from any exam center. Well, in that scenario, being online is great. You don't have to go anywhere. You just make sure you have a controlled environment. They tell you what the environment should look like, and then you set it up and it works fine. So there is a very different experience when you're dealing with the exam. To the second question, can you use scratch paper? If you are in a testing center, they will give you either paper or a erasable marker and something you can write on with that erasable marker, and you turn that in at the end of the exam. At home, you don't have that option. You don't have a physical writing implement. Instead, at home, there is when you start the exam, there's an online, kind of like a notepad. They used to be a lot of different features with painting, and you could draw things. And now it's just text. Now you just type in. So you can keep notes as you go through the exam, or you can put notes into this notepad, and you can reference that notepad wherever you are within the exam. So it's sort of like scratch paper, but not really, because you have to type everything in, which may or may not be a good idea for you. So make sure you understand what the differences are, or which one may be better for you. Some people love taking their exams at home. Some people hate taking their exams at home. So that's completely up to you. It's very subjective, and find the one that works best for you and go with it. Me personally, I would never take my exam at home. There's just too many variables involved. I'd be worrying constantly about noises and somebody walking in. I don't want to be in that situation, so I'll just go to a testing center and I'm good to go. Makes sense to me. Other questions. Let's keep going down this list. Why did CompTIA shrink the Security Plus? 33% less objectives seems pretty significant. Well, I guess it could be. It's not really. In reality, these tests tend to change dramatically. What you don't know is when the exam went from the 501 to the 601, it blew up into this monster that we have today in the 601, and this big 1,000 objective exam. Well, this brings up a good question. How many objectives were on the 501 exam? Let's find out, because of course I counted those too back when I did the 501 exam. So let me bring up my spreadsheet for the 501 just to give you a perspective. Security Plus, video index and objectives. Of course, I have a spreadsheet for this. And I have a 501-601 diff that I did. And this is interesting. So we're going back now 3 years, back in time. And this one's very hard to see exactly what I have on the screen here. And I'm not sure why it kind of looks this way. But I'm going to break this down so that we could see it a little bit better for all of you. I wasn't planning to show this, so I apologize. Okay. So on the 501 exam, I counted the number of objectives. And in the 501 exam, is this a good thing? Let me show this a little bit differently. Let me just grab the tab and pull it over for this one. Okay. On the 501 exam, the total number of objectives on the 501 are 778. Okay. Well, that's quite smaller than the 1,038 that were in the 601. 778 is on the 501. And if we go back and look at our stats for the 701, 701 has 662. 701 tends to have fewer or somewhere closer to what the 501 originally had. So that's why CompTIA shrunk down the number of objectives, probably because people like me who create content for these exams told them, wow, this exam is big. Why is this exam so large? Could we maybe have a more right-sized exam? And in fact, if you look at the A+ or Network Plus, I would say that the current version of the Security Plus exam is much more in line with what you would find on the 701. So they've sort of brought it back to where it was and made it more of a more reasonable size for people that were studying. I think they recognized that they tried to put a lot of stuff in the 601 and a lot of it was very important, but it was just too much. And it was much easier to kind of spread these topics throughout the 3 different Security Plus certifications CompTIA now has, which back in the days of the 301, 401, they did not have. So that's a pretty good idea of really breaking all of these things out and understanding what the differences are. And I think that was a pretty good move. I think that makes the 701 a little bit easier from a studying perspective because there are fewer objectives to learn. But I think it's also a good pathway. They kind of give you the fundamentals first. You get that foundation, and from there we can build on the foundation with additional security-related certifications from CompTIA or even other places. So I think that's one of the best ways to work through that. Other questions. So let's do this. Let's talk about one of these. I think this one is a pretty good one. This sort of talks to this topic that we talked about earlier and sort of understanding what the differences would be. This question says, I took a class in school. Let's just flip this over. We're just going to, there we go. Took a class in school preparing the 601 version. It was a year ago, though. Started studying again for the cert last week. Should I continue with the 601 or pivot to the 701? Well, you've already gone through the 601 studies. You're done. You did it. All you have to do is refresh what you may have lost in that 1 year, and you can go take your 601 and you're certified. That's it. So if you've already gone through the process of studying all 1,000 of those objectives that are in the 601, why wouldn't you take advantage of that and go take the 601 exam? Now, what if you started looking at the 601 stuff you did a year ago, and maybe a lot has happened in a year? You don't know what's going on with these topics anymore. You don't remember any of these topics from the 601. Okay, well, I could see there might be a reason you might want to jump to the 701 and study those topics, but you're going to have to go through a whole new set of objectives, a whole new set of study materials, and you're going to have to study everything that is now new on the 701 exam. I guess forget the 65% that is still over on the 601 side. The 701 is newer, but not necessarily better depending on your scenario. So it's up to you. If you remember everything from your 601 studies, I would recommend you go take the 601 exam. If you don't remember any of it, well, maybe starting over with the 701 makes more sense. It's, again, completely up to you. It depends on how you want to approach these topics and how much you want to study for all of this. And it may also have something to do with how much money you want to spend on new study materials, because you can't use your 601 materials to study for the 701 exam. That won't work. That's a very bad idea, especially when 65% of the 601 never appears on the 701. That's a big number. So you're wasting more than half of your time if you're studying a 601 book and going to take the 701 exam. That's why I tell you, make sure your study materials and your exams match perfectly. And if they do, you're going to be fine. If they don't, it's a little bit more of a concern. Well, I think that is a good overview of 601 versus 701. I think that gives us at least an opportunity to understand what we needed to know to get through the 701 exam. And indeed, we did get through our very first 701 study group. This is one where, of course, going forward, we will continue to do 701 materials. The 601, of course, will retire at the end of July. On July 31st is the last day to take your 601. If you are studying for the 601 and you're working to get there, make sure you take your exam before that. That way, if something happens or doesn't go as you expected, you still have time to take it again and be able to pass that exam. So don't wait until the very last day. Never a good idea. And if you're someone who's studying for the 701, we have videos, we have course notes, and there's even more study materials coming out all the time. We've got a lot of things on our website. You're more than welcome to have a look at ProfessorMesser.com. Well, we do one of these study groups every month. If you enjoyed this one, we'd love it if you would give it a thumbs up. And if you subscribe to our YouTube channel, it would be even better at ProfessorMesser.com/YouTube. If you ever want to know when the next live event is going to be, we keep the calendar on our website. It's updated all the time. I updated it this morning with all of those new dates. You can always go to ProfessorMesser.com/calendar or choose the calendar link at the top of the Professor Messer website. And of course, we're always on Discord. If you'd like to join us when we're not doing a live stream, we're hanging out on my Discord server. You can join that at ProfessorMesser.com/Discord. Well, that brings us to the end of another Security Plus study group. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for all of you that stayed in through all of the network outage and the things going on at the folks at Google and YouTube. Thank you for hanging in there and making it so much better. Chat room, you've been awesome. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time on the Security Plus study group. Thanks, everybody.